This is Beyond Average, episode 11.
The one thing we have in this world is we can't control the events, but we can choose what to focus on, we can choose what things mean, and we can choose what to do.
We're live.
All right. Hey, welcome back, guys. You're listening to Beyond Average podcast, bringing you a new way of thinking about health, wealth, and entrepreneurship. How was your week, Anthony?
Week was good. Not over yet, but super busy at work. Got some new, hopefully some new clients, working on some big deals. And just like we said last time, trying to put yourself in as many uncomfortable situations as possible every day.
Yeah, and I heard another good one by Grant. Said at TGIF, which is tomorrow, is thank God I'm free. It's no more of this. Thank God it's Friday.
The minute you start saying I hate Mondays and I love Fridays, you're admitting like you're a slave to the system. You know what I mean? That's like you admitting defeat, that you have no control over your own life. You know what I mean? Right. It's just like you've just succumbed to the idea of you're going to work for 40 hours a week for 40 years and then hope you don't outlive your retirement.
Right. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like me personally, my week is just set up where I kind of work Monday through Friday. And then the weekend, I'm just doing other work, like working on my career, like whether it's real estate and stuff done around the house, whatever. Yeah. But your week shouldn't end on a Friday. It shouldn't be Friday comes and you just take off of life and you just lay on the couch all weekend because you're off. Yeah,
well, what that infers is that you're basically doing productive stuff for a certain number of days, and then you're totally unproductive for the next few days, which is the weekend. I think of it more of as like a continual cycle where every day, you should be doing some work, doing some reading, having some leisure time. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. And honestly, I mean, if you're on your shit, you'll realize pretty soon there's not enough hours in the day to begin with. I mean, you run out so fast before you know it's dark and it's time to go back to sleep. So it's like, I don't know how people have the time to sit down and just take off a weekend.
Which is a problem we've had, not having enough time to put these podcasts together. But we had to prioritize and make some changes and make sure we put them out. So, and that's really what today's episode is about, is podcasting. And I guess we should first define what exactly is a podcast, right?
Yeah. I mean, what my definition, I guess, is it's just like it's almost like a radio show that's pre-recorded that you kind of play back. I mean, it's almost set up in like episode form, they're usually always numbered. I mean, it's pretty simple concept, right?
You hit the nail on the head with the pre-recorded radio show, which is basically what it is. But the most important thing I think about that is it's on demand, right? So it's kind of going the way of like Netflix, where you can consume the media at your own pace. So just because somebody records, like we're recording this podcast at 7:30 on what's today, Thursday evening. You might be listening to this on Sunday afternoon. Whereas if it's a live radio show, if you miss it, too bad. You know what I mean?
Right. And I know myself, like I'll listen to podcasts in the morning, whether I've been actually downloading an app. You should check it out. Whoever's listening to this is a Grant Cardone. I think it's GCTV app. And there's a lot of like, some of the shows are a little corny, but he has like a little station on there. But he has all these different shows they put on there that some wouldn't be considered podcasts, but I guess it's all the same thing. But what I was trying to say is like I'll start playing one, and then like my time will run out for the morning when I'm done cooking breakfast, and I'm halfway through. I'm halfway through Peter's shift or something. And,
Corey can't say breakfast.
Breakfast. I should try to say fast. But I'll listen till I get halfway through, and I'm like, I got to start work, and I'll put some music on or listen to Joe Rogan's podcast because that's easier to work to because it's more just they're hanging out conversations. It's like you're hanging out with them while you're working.
Yeah, I have an app called it's an Android app. It's probably on iOS also. It's called Podcast Addict, and basically it's a podcast reader. There's a million of them. I happen to like this one the best, but what you can do is set it up so that you subscribe to this whatever podcast you want. It'll automatically download them. I have it set to do it at like 3 a.m. So I'll wake up in the morning. It'll say 6 new podcasts downloaded. You know what I mean?
Oh, cool.
So you download them over Wi-Fi, and then you listen to them throughout the day. It just does it automatically in the background. So it's just a really easy way to consume media. And like we've said probably 3 or 4 times, what the result is a lot of times is these long form interviews as opposed to being on TV where you get 60 seconds to share your point on one of these news networks.
Yeah.
On a-
Meanwhile, you got someone attacking you about
Yeah.
personal things, and it's just
A
it's
podcast
stupid.
is like you go super in depth on whatever topic it is. So
Right. And I guess actually mentioned Joe Rogan's. His is regularly 3 hours, 2 hours long. You know, they're long interviews. I mean, and he's not the only one putting long ones out. But like you said, it's just you get a grasp of like what the topic actually is, and you can form a real opinion on it based off of facts, not just some guy arguing with somebody else on TV for 5 minutes, not even 30 seconds.
And don't let that intimidate you if you're thinking about doing a podcast and saying, holy shit, I can't do 3 hours. There's podcasts that are released like weekly that are 6 minutes long. There's one about it was about grammar. So she would teach you like when to use less versus fewer as an example.
Do you subscribe to that?
No, but I just happen to.
Maybe I should.
Yeah.
I'll say breakfast.
Yeah. The Enunciation podcast. No, I was scrolling through like the top podcasts on iTunes, just going through the list looking for interesting ones, and I happened to see that one. And I noticed they were all like 5 minutes long. So you could do a quote of the day podcast. Yeah. I'm sure people would listen to it.
Yeah, or a popular time is like 20 minutes to like 40 minutes. That's what ours started as. We planned to do it for 30, but we had a few that run to an hour, if it's like a good topic.
Well, I mean, just speaking personally, we were worried saying, can we talk about something for a half hour? And we had the opposite problem. We have to cut them short and kind of make sure we go a little quicker because it's very easy to explore a topic in depth. And once you get comfortable doing it, you just start going, and you can easily go over an hour.
Right. And it makes it easier when you're trying to podcast too, is if you just don't even think about people listening. Like I just think of us having a conversation. I mean, we'd have hundreds of these conversations before anyway. Now we're able to share them with people, which is it's a new age thing. And it's easy just to keep talking, just don't think about it. Actually, I didn't even think people were listening to it until AJ commented on a video saying, he's cracking up about a certain part of last episode. I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, people are actually listening to this now. It's pretty cool.
Speaking of which, we'll plug AJ. He's a friend of mine from college, and his podcast is called Acupuncturist on Fire, and it's about acupuncture, which kind of leads into. So check that out on iTunes, but it kind of leads into, and we'll link it to below on the show notes, which will be beyondaveragepodcast.com/011. But that leads into the main point of. Because the first thing someone's going to say if you tell them to do a podcast is, I don't have anything to talk about, which is bullshit. Because if I think of all our close friends, just us personally, I could think of each person having something specific that they could share a lot of information about, and people would actually want to hear it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And everybody has something worth sharing.
And I mean, you and I both are. I guess we got the concept early on. It was like it's good to know a little bit about everything. So that's kind of why we are so broad. But like your buddy AJ is like, he's all about, acupuncture. So it's not like every week he has to come up with some if you're doing something like that, you don't have to come up with some crazy new material every week and feel pressured. I mean, you can just get on there and talk about current events going on in the industry, maybe deals that you're doing or where you're working, Like you said, it's just really up to you. You have the freedom to talk about whatever you want.
See, we actually are at a detriment in the sense that our niche is so broad. Which makes it'll make it harder to monetize probably and harder to really get it going. But we do it because we want to do it, not because we're trying to, profit from it or anything. But, I think of some of our friends, do we know someone who could probably do a diesel trucks podcast?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do you know someone in your life who could probably do a podcast on football or a podcast on whatever? You know what I mean? So ladies, probably someone could do a podcast on just doing makeup or, fashion.
Right. And they're already out there. There's YouTube channels on that, makeup. There's one for the yoga, it's everything. That's the crazy thing about the internet now. It's like this global marketplace. And, there's like 7.6 billion people on this planet or, some ridiculous. And a tiny fraction are only using the internet right now. And in the next coming decade, it's said to be that, 6 billion of them out of the 7 point whatever billion are going to be online at one point or another. I mean, that's like just being in a mall with the whole world's there. They're at the mall with you. It's pretty crazy to think about. And if you can kind of get your voice out there and talk to, there's got to be someone on the other side of the world that's into what you're into.
Yeah.
I mean, just statistically, it's I don't know. It's kind of like gravity. There has to be somebody.
And statistically, it's like gravity. I'm gonna use that tomorrow. But there's more to it than just just having a topic that you like and having something worth sharing. There's other reasons that you should do a podcast, more for like personal development, because I know we probably don't want to admit it, but it's like intimidating to have to sit in front of a microphone and record yourself and then know that you're going to share that with everybody you know.
Right.
People watching it right now are judging us. They're saying, "Oh, that's a good point," or "You're a fucking idiot." You know what I mean? Probably, or somewhere in between.
Right. Everyone's not going to agree with you, no matter what. It's just,
and not even agree. I mean, they might not like the way you looked, or what you said, how you said it, or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you are putting yourself out there, but I think part of that is an exercise in and of itself that's worthwhile.
No, I agree, and I can attest to that because it actually just came up a few times. I've been having conversations with a couple of people, but I'm naturally kind of like an introvert. I was always kind of quiet. And I always had a group of friends that I hung out with, so I didn't have to go out of my way to meet people.
Yeah, sure.
But then I kind of started learning that in the world of business, you can't be like that. You got to be smiles, handshakes, and you got to remember certain facts about certain people. So the next time you see them, how's little Johnny doing and stuff like that. So it's you kind of got to learn how to be an extrovert, whether you like it or not. And it's really not that hard. I mean, you just, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and just growing from them,
And the more I think about it, the more you do put yourself in uncomfortable situations at network and meet people who you were, who you didn't expect to meet or whatever, the more you realize that, or the more I say to myself, why didn't I do that sooner? We should have started a podcast 2 years ago, because it just sounded like something foreign. Oh, I don't do podcasts. The people on the internet do podcasts. No, they're just people like us. They put their pants on one leg at a time, and anything in life that it seems too complicated or too difficult, somebody's doing it already, and they're probably not much different than you. But anyway,
right, no, exactly. I think that was a famous quote by Steve Jobs, right? He said the world's made up by people that are just no smarter than you.
That's it.
I mean, that's kind of paraphrased, but he's right. I mean, the difference between the super successful people and the ones that aren't are just the drive, the ambition, and just the willingness to just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's one key thing is that the successful people do stuff. You do something,
right?
Whether it's right, wrong, you just do something. You know what I mean? So that's why you should be podcasting, for both personal development, also to build your brand. You put yourself out there. There's so many good reasons to do it, and it's fun. It's a kind of a fun exercise to start a little. It's not like it's sort of like a business. It doesn't generate any revenue, but you kind of have to brand yourself. You have to grow it. You have to market it. So it's there's so much. It's so much more valuable than just putting out the content.
Right. No, I agree. And another key point I've heard recently is it's kind of the shift that the world's kind of taken on. And we talked about this before, just a big shift into online streaming, Netflix type, style of consuming media.
Consuming content on demand as opposed to appointment television. You know what I mean? It's it's like the shift from TV to Netflix is like the shift from radio to podcasting. Podcasting was like a joke years ago. It was kind of some fringe thing. And now, guys like Joe Rogan and stuff are getting millions of downloads. I bet you more people know Joe Rogan than some of the people on the radio in New York metro area.
Yeah,
they do. What I mean? So it's worldwide.
And that was, a guy that really wasn't in the mainstream before. I don't think his podcast, if not, they just knew him as the Fear Factor guy. No one knew he did stand up or anything.
I had no idea he was a comedian. I had no idea he was involved in MMA and all that stuff.
Dude, and it's not even him. There's just so many people you wouldn't think of doing podcasts now. Comedian Bill Burr.
Of course, Bill Burr's podcast is great.
And it's there's so many of them.
I found through podcasting, I found a guy who's actually two guys, my two favorite comedians these days outside of Joe Rogan, because I actually think Joe Rogan's super interesting. I don't think he's that funny. I think he's a decent.
He has a couple funny bits.
Yeah, he's a decent comedian. He's a really good podcaster because he's a really bright guy. But Joey Diaz has a podcast called The Church of What's Happening Now, and plenty of profanity and just crazy stories. It's an unbelievable podcast. You'd be in stitches the whole time you're listening to it, or shocked or something.
You ever see his morning Meerkat or Periscope posts?
He does he smokes a morning joint. So he'll go outside and he'll smoke a joint, but he's talking all inspirational stuff at 6 a.m.
Yeah, it's pretty comical. But that's the cool thing. You can do shit like that. It's your podcast. Do whatever you want. Or your Periscope, whatever.
The other guy I'm a big fan of is Dean Del Rey, who's another comedian out in Los Angeles, and he was like he was a guy who played music forever. In that whole scene in the '80s in LA. So he's got a lot of perspective because he knew all the guys that were in the big rock and roll bands from the '80s, and now he's a comedian, has a podcast, and really funny, really interesting. So that's another cool one.
And you got to think about it too. It's like you're essentially you're being cultured. How else would you experience what it's like to be a rock star without unless you heard it from one himself, and it just told you what it was like,
That's such a great point because there's a guy, a primary source who was there living that, talking about how much cocaine they used to do, this and that, or whatever. He knew Axl and Slash, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's the same thing with Joey Diaz, but in a different way, talking about how they used to have a scam where they used to beat the guy up at the gas station and rob him, but the guy who they were beating up was in on it. They would give him like 10% back after they left.
Yeah.
And they would do this for once a month for a year. They would just beat the shit out of this guy, steal the money, and then when they saw him later on, they would give him back 10 or 20%.
Yeah, I mean, and you wouldn't, I guess, know about these things or how to run one of them scans if you didn't listen to podcasts.
But the point is, he came from some crazy, really rough neighborhoods like in New Jersey when he was a kid, and how else you would never know anything about what that was like if you didn't experience it yourself. But now you kind of can view it through his eyes. Right,
and there's something in psychology called your schema. I don't know if you ever. I'm sure you had Psychology 101, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever go over that. I mean,
sounds familiar.
Probably sounds familiar. I think that's the first thing you learn is your schema. It's basically your hard drive. I think of it as that kind of all your life experiences. It kind of downloaded onto, and it just adds to your. I guess it kind of affects the way your perspective, your IQ, and just all different things. But I think the more you can experience, whether it's just through listening through stories and hearing about it, or being there, experiencing yourself. I don't know. I think there's some benefit to that.
Sure.
So, if you can get that through podcasts, why not?
So I think we talked enough about the benefits of why you should do it. As far as picking a topic, like we said, everyone's got something to talk about. I personally think, unlike what we did, the more specific, the better. The more dialed in your niche is, I think the better off you are. I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say we were kind of conflicted like that at the beginning. We're trying to pick a niche, but it was kind of there's just so much to talk about. So how can you just pick one thing,
Yeah. Well, I guess our niche really is, the success and motivation niche, kind of not beyond average, right? So it's kind of self-explanatory, but that covers a wide range of topics. But I mean, if you play World of Warcraft, for 20 hours a week, you might want to make a podcast on World of Warcraft. I mean, you could certainly do that. You could do it on makeup, football, whatever.
I've seen a podcast. I mean, I'm not really into that. I was just kind of flipping through, and I saw a podcast like that. He was a kid playing video games, literally playing. He makes money playing video games.
Well, that's the website, Twitch, I think is the name of it. And these kids actually play, and I guess they're really good at games or whatever. And people will watch them play live, and they actually make money.
No,
and they make a lot of money because Joe Rogan had one of the kids on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Talking about that's somebody else then, because actually it's the individual and he was just on there, happened to be playing video games, and he's on there, just talking, and so I mean that's I don't know, but don't please, someone that plays video games all day, please don't take that as a reason to rationalize why you can do it all day. I mean, these are a select few that they're doing other behind the scenes things besides just playing video games all day.
And if you're self-employed, if you're an entrepreneur, I think a podcast is great. I mean, just look at what AJ's doing in terms of building his brand and building his business.
Right.
He does acupuncture, and he's building a podcast about acupuncture. Now everybody in that community knows who he is. Right. I mean, I'm sure once I'm owning apartments or whatever, I'll be doing a real estate podcast. Specifically for real estate.
Yeah, and it's just a way to, like you said, brand yourself. You can get your voice out there, about your business. And just it's just another class of people to appeal to, because maybe he can appeal to an older class of people that maybe don't listen to podcasts. You do it through regular, word of mouth marketing or, actual advertising marketing. Yeah. And then you can probably get some younger customers that do listen to podcasts and stuff, tuning into what he has to say, and they like what he has to say. They, so they go check him out. So it's a great addition to a business if you have the time to do it. And, I mean, how much time does it really take for us to do this? I mean, we want to walk through the process of, how we do it.
Well, as far as the recording of the podcast in terms of time, I mean, what you see is kind of what you get. Like if this podcast is 40 minutes long, it might take us 42 minutes. We kind of talk for a minute before and a minute after, and that's really it. We've done podcasts where we make outlines and kind of follow a script, not a script, but an outline of kind of what we want to hit. We found that kind of going off the cuff actually works a little bit better.
Yeah. And that was another really interesting point is I heard from somebody else that does podcasts, and she's like a professional, she knows a lot about the industry. I guess she's been here for a while. She said is like to do what you want to do. Like don't make a podcast to like I guess curtail to a certain group of people.
Yeah.
Make it sound good to yourself, and make sure you enjoy it. And then other people, if they enjoy it, they enjoy it. If not, they don't. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah. You can kind of you can outline it if you want to. I know some people that do that, but like you said, we found it easier for us just to start talking. It's just kind of more laid back and conversational.
So I guess the next thing to do is really, and I'll say this first, is that if you're going to do it, and hopefully by now someone's listening saying, you know what, that is a good idea, I want to try it. Do it the right way. You have to buy some equipment. It's not expensive, but to just talk into your computer microphone, it's going to sound like shit. No one's going to want to listen to it. And there's nothing worse than audio that sounds terrible.
Right.
So just listen to what we're going to tell you here about like what you have to buy and kind of some websites that you need to use. And you can actually make a professional sounding podcast on a very low budget.
Right. And what I would suggest too is like, and you can apply this really to anything, and I kind of try to follow it, is like when you plan on doing something new, and we're going to explain it with the podcast next, but I mean, always do your research. I take my time. You don't want to research too much and never get around to it, but you want to set aside 15, 20 minutes, if you have to for this topic, and then kind of go from there. You might be researching stuff for an hour or two. We took our time to figure out, what kind of mics you should get, what kind of sites you use. With anything, you kind of want to go step by step and do a little research so you're not, because you cost yourself time and money down the road if you don't, No,
I agree 100%. And so once you're going to jump in with 2 feet and just get going. So I guess the first thing you need to decide is, are you going to do a video podcast or an audio podcast? And really, I would say probably 80 or 90% of the way people listen to podcasts is audio, in terms of when they download it on iTunes or when they download it to their podcast app on their phone. It's audio. But the reason we chose to do a video podcast is because it's easier to share it on social media. People like to watch something as they're listening. If we just put the little flash player of an audio clip on there, we probably have half the plays that we do from having a video. Would you agree? Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. Because there's something about it, like you said, is people like to see it for some reason. And the cool thing about today's technology, you can do both. You can just do the video, and then what do? We extract the audio, and that gets added to the iTunes and everything, and then we have the video that we share.
It's not any harder to add video, so
right.
You probably should. It's probably a good idea. If you don't want to do it, you don't really have to. I mean, when you talk about the top podcasts on iTunes, a lot of them don't have any video at all. So you can really do it whichever way, but we just figured there's no reason not to. So, and you could tell we don't have professional cameras. I mean, we just using our computer cameras, which, shame on us. We probably should, but like we said, we know that the video for us is not particularly important. You get the gist of just seeing us talk.
And listen, if it takes off, of course, we can take that route. We can actually do this in a set area every week, and then
upgrade.
Actually have legitimate cameras and table and everything. But for now, it's I'm in my bedroom, you're in your office, and that's it.
So okay, so you're ready to do a podcast. Let's assume you're going to do a video podcast. You could buy a camera or a webcam that'll record in HD, or use your computer. New computers, I think my computer records in 720p. Which I think is good enough. I don't think you need to be any more complicated than that. If you want to get your own webcam, so instead of sitting in front of the computer like we are, you could be sitting at a table and have your camera pointed at you that way, and it maybe looks a little more professional. That's your prerogative. But one thing you're definitely going to need first, we'll talk about the software. So the good news is that they're both free, whether you're on Mac or PC. and we've both used this program, so you can attest to how easy it is. It's a program called Audacity, and this will do two things. One is you can use it to filter your audio and clean it up a little bit. You can also use it to actually record your audio if you want to. Now, if you're doing a video podcast, you're probably not going to use this. But if you're just doing audio, you can use this program Audacity to just record the audio file itself, and it's super easy to use.
We'd actually used it where we recorded the both Audacity and did the video because we were having issues, So it's a good way to back it up if you're ever in that situation. If you ever find yourself in a situation where your video is acting funny, because we were having problems with, I guess, Skype one night. It was acting real bad, and we ended up recording it, and then laying the track back over. But I mean, I was just throwing it out there if you ever run into that problem.
Exactly. And then on Mac, there's a program called GarageBand, and it's pretty much the same thing. It's free, and I don't know anything about Macs. I hate everything to do with Mac. And but if you have that, you could probably go the GarageBand route, and it's got the same basic features. And I know there's another one. If you pay for Adobe Photoshop, I think you probably get with it Adobe Audition, which is like a more fancy version, which probably has more features than you need. So, those three are the options. Download Audacity. It's 100% free. It's always going to be free, and it's a good way to get started. So that brings us to our next point. You got to figure out how many people are going to be on your podcast. If you're recording the podcast by yourself, you could just use Audacity. But I don't know, maybe you want to talk a little bit about this, about how the fact that we have to use Skype since we're often not in the same location.
Well, I mean, I don't work for Skype or anything. I don't know anything more than you do. But I can say that it's just it's been, the easiest way for us to do it. I mean, we tried to use another program and laying the movies over each other, but it was we're having issues with syncing it up. And the easiest way we found it was using Skype and using Skype for desktop, because for some reason other Skype that's part of Windows, I guess.
It's like a Windows. It's a Windows app. Yeah.
Yeah. It's terrible. So Skype for desktop is like a separate window that you open up, called Skype, and we use that, and it's been good so far, except for the one night we were talking about the Federal Reserve, and I shit you not, we're having great connection tonight, and any night before that. The one night we started dropping Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke and started talking about them. It took us literally an extra hour to get the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes, done.
Kept cutting out, right?
Oh, it's terrible. It was we get a good 60 seconds and then have to start over. So I don't know. But yeah, other than that conspiracy, it's been pretty good.
So if you're going to do it with a co-host, this is where things get a little bit more complicated. First, if you're going to do it remotely like we're doing it right now, we're obviously not in the same location. You need to buy a program. There's two. One's called Pamela. The one we use is called Evaer, Evaer. And what they both do is they record video calls on Skype. So basically, that's how you record what you see on the Skype screen. Now, that makes that easy. If you're in two different places, that'll record it, no problem. If you're together in the same room and you don't want to use Skype, and there's good reason for not using Skype, because then you don't have to depend on the internet. Like, for example, if the Wi-Fi cuts out for a second, it screws up our podcast. So if you are together in the same room and you want multiple co-hosts, you're going to have to figure out how to get both people to be recorded into one computer. Right. You could either do one of two things. You can record yourself and I can record me, and then we can lay the tracks over each other in the editing software. Or you can buy what they call a mixer, which is basically you plug the microphones into the mixer and then the mixer goes into the computer. So that's one way you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, probably even more microphones recording at once into the same machine. Because I don't think you can plug two microphones into one computer. I don't think a computer sound card can handle those two different inputs at the same time.
Right.
If I understand. So.
Right. And, just to throw it out there, I don't know about you, Anthony, but I mean, I was never a software engineer or anything. It's all pretty easy to figure out once you get going. It's just really matching numbers up. Does this mic work for this computer? Does this mixer work for this mic? You're going to spend like a half hour playing around with it, dicking around the first time you do it, and you'll figure it out. For example, when we record on Skype,
the program automatically launches and starts recording as soon as our call connects. So we literally have to do nothing. Now, if we're in the same room and we want to record ourselves locally, like you can record on your computer, I can record on mine, that's easy enough to do. It's really only when you're having multiple microphones plugged into a mixer, if you're going to do it that way, that it gets a little bit more complicated. But like I said, you do it the first time and then you don't have to worry about it again.
And we're going to add another dimension to this soon. Speaking of other guests, I think we're going to have our first guest, soon. So we're going to have to, I guess you already have an idea of how we're going to do that, but
yeah, it's going to be new for us too. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that and how to have them get recorded properly. So,
but that's the beautiful thing about the internet. There is literally the answer for everything. Not all of them are right. It is the internet, so it's a lot of bullshit on there too. But there's just literally, it's the world's biggest library that's, never existed, and it's invisible. It's just crazy.
And it's free.
It's free, for now. And we can access stuff for now. We'll see.
For now.
How the future goes.
All right, so let's talk about the actual equipment. So you're going to need microphones. And like we said, you're not going to use your computer microphone. If you do, no one's going to take you seriously, and you're going to sound like shit. Now, the microphones we bought were not expensive. I think we paid $40 and we got 3 microphones. It was like a set of 3. Ours are from a company called Behringer. You could buy them on Amazon. The ratings were pretty decent. As for a $40 microphone, I thought it was pretty good. The one thing I'll say is that there's 2 types of microphones. Generally speaking, you have condenser microphones and dynamic microphones. Condenser microphones are typically seen as being better because they capture sound more completely in all directions. You actually don't want that for a podcast. You want what's called a dynamic microphone. And reason being is it's capturing sound only in the direction of me. So if someone opens the door over here or the dog's barking outside, it's going to pick up a lot less of that, which would be good maybe for a recording studio, but it's going to pick up less of that in our case and only record what's coming out of my mouth right in front of it.
Right, and actually, just as you said that, when you backed up the talk, I'm sure the people listening, you kind of you probably heard them, the volume lower a little bit, and that's because of the mic. That's the way it's set up, where it's like if you get too far away from the mic, you got to be like in the mic talking to it, which for a podcast, like you said, is perfect.
Yeah, so for its purpose, it does a good job. You could spend a lot of money. There's one called the Heil PR40. I think it's like $320 on Amazon. It's like the best mic you could ever buy. If you're really doing Joe Rogan's podcast, he probably has Heil PR40s on there. I don't think you need that to get started. Just buy the $40 set of 3 that we did. We'll actually link to it in Amazon.
Jesse would have that.
If Jesse started a podcast, he would build a new podcast studio as an addition on the house.
And then he'd order that mic, and then
he'd have 4K video cameras. He'd have that mic. He'd probably have a mixing board with 16 inputs, and then he would think about what he wanted to talk about at the end.
Yeah, basically.
That's actually a compliment to say he buys good shit.
Yeah. Goes above and beyond.
So, listen, buy a dynamic microphone. Buy the Behringer 3-pack. I think that's the way to start. Unless you have the budget, then you can buy more expensive stuff if you really wanted to.
I think it cost us the whole total startup for everything. What was it? $160 altogether. So each of us was like $80 a piece.
Yeah,
which is nothing. It's like and we have a show. It's very easy to maintain. Like you said, we do the video, we record it. Whatever, how long it takes, and then what do you spend another maybe half an hour editing it and then downloading it?
Yeah, probably half hour to an hour editing it, but only because I'm a little bit fanatical. I could just let it go and it would be fine, but I try to make sure it's perfect.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just how just kind of how I am, almost to a detriment. The actual longest part is rendering the video, which could take an hour or 2 hours, but obviously you're not sitting in front of the computer for that. You're off doing whatever. So
right. So all right. So we covered what you're going to need. What else do you think they would need? You got their equipment, the software.
If you want to buy a mixer, if you're going to have 2 people recording a podcast in one spot, you're going to need a mixer. You could probably buy a mixer on the cheap end for like $50 or $60. if you want to go the budget route and not buy a mixer, you could just have each person record into their own computer, like
Which
we
is what
said
we
earlier,
did.
and then lay the tracks over each other.
Yeah.
That
Which
seems
is
to work. Yeah, it seems to work pretty good for us. So
Yeah, when we recorded, our first shows that were together, that's what we did. And having the dynamic mics, I mean, we really didn't pick each other's audio up at all. So
right.
we troubleshot that one for you. It's, you're good if you decide to do that.
They also have dedicated audio recorders, so it'd be like a handheld thing, almost the size of like a smartphone, but a little thicker. And you can actually plug, I think, 2 mics into that. And so we could just be out in public and just hanging out, not near a computer, and record directly into that. Obviously, there'd be no video, but that's another easy way to do it if you don't want to be dependent on the computer.
All right.
So, and that you could buy one of those for $50-$60. It's just another way to do it.
Yeah. So I mean that's really it. So if it's a budget thing you're worrying about, don't worry about it. It's really not that expensive to get started, especially if you do it with somebody. You can split the cost. And there's plenty of benefits, which we mentioned before.
Yeah.
What else, is there anything else you want to, I guess, mention?
Well, and also too, if you're doing a podcast solo, you might get away with only buying one microphone, which maybe you'll get for $20 or something. So
yeah, that's true.
You could be all in for software and for the microphone for $20. If you want to buy the stuff to record on Skype, you figure another $20, you're in for $40. If you want to buy the 3-pack of microphones, you're in for $60. So
yeah,
it's really not a huge monetary commitment.
No, and the 160 that costs us overall, I'm also factoring in. We bought like a logo, a couple logos on a Fiverr. I think we bought.
So let's get into that stuff because we haven't really talked about that. So let me ask you what you think. Do you need a website to do a podcast?
Do you need one? No. Should you have one? Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, because it's it's not like I said. If you want to just record it and just have a Facebook page and just have a Twitter, that's perfectly fine. But having a website that you can direct people to is one. It's a good way to monetize later on if that's just an option for you. And two, you just give people a hub that can see all your stuff. That's besides YouTube. On there you can post articles. It's your website. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. So
which we haven't done yet. We should probably try to figure out a way to do that.
Let's talk about this. Once you record a podcast and you have that file, and maybe, oh, by the way, two other resources I want to mention. One is called Auphonic, AUPHONIC.com, and the other one's called The Levelator. I think that's a piece of software. Actually, it's free. So you will input your audio into those programs, and it'll actually clean the audio for you, totally free. So it'll actually make our voices the same level. It'll remove background noise, any buzzing, anything else. So you'll get a professional sounding podcast that sounds good for free. So we'll link to both of those. So anyway, so once that's done though, once you've recorded the podcast, you edited the program in Audacity. Now you have this file. So what do you do with it? Now, you can't just put it on your website because what you probably would have is shared hosting, which is the cheapest way to have web hosting. And if 1,000 people came to download your podcast off your website, you would probably crash the server, and your web host provider would be none too happy with you. So the one thing you really have to do is this: where you have to spend a little bit of extra money, is you have to pay for a host. So that means a dedicated podcast host.
Right. And but I mean that's not even that expensive. What was that? That's
so
the $20 for the year or something.
We paid it was $36 for the year.
Okay.
So whatever, it's $3 a month. It's really not a big deal. We
$10 for a domain. Right.
Yeah, but that's if you want a website. Now, if you don't want a website, you still need podcast hosting. You need to have a professional podcasting company host your media files, so that way thousands of people can download it at one time and there'll be no problems. Libsyn, Libsyn, is probably the most popular. It's not the cheapest. There's one called Blueberry. It's spelled a little funny, but if you Google it, you'll find it. SoundCloud actually does podcast hosting now. They're not the cheapest either. The one that we found that was kind of the combination of a good rating and also cheap was Podbean, Bean, Podbean. And for $36 a year, they host all of our media files. So that way when people download them, they're not downloading it from our website. They're actually downloading it from the Podbean website.
Right. And they have the servers that can handle, thousands of people doing this, on 1,000 different, probably hundreds of thousands of different podcasts. I don't know how many are actually out there, but
all at once.
A lot, yeah. So yeah, that's a necessity.
So let's go back 1 second. So we recommend that you do get a website. You've seen our website. How fast did we put that website up? Within like an hour or 2 hours?
Yeah, it didn't take long. Let's say, granted, like we both have experience on WordPress, but WordPress now, literally,
it's so intuitive.
Yeah, and if you had a college class, you've probably done it before or messed around with WordPress. And if you haven't, don't worry about it. It's all, they have the little question marks that you can click on and ask questions.
So
it's not.
You want to explain what exactly WordPress is?
Well, what would it be? Like, I guess a hosting site that you can build a website with widgets, basically.
Yeah, so it's actually
a developer.
It started as a blogging platform. So instead of having to know HTML code, you install WordPress, and then you can just like drag and drop stuff.
Right.
But you don't have to use it as a blog. You can use it as a regular website as well, which is probably what most people do.
Which was brilliant, because now you have people that have no clue how to code sites that can build websites
and look professional. Look at our website,
right.
BeyondAveragePodcast.com. It looks awesome. And
looks good, yeah.
We didn't do any of the work. We literally uploaded a couple pictures. We moved this around. We changed the text. If you can edit a Microsoft Word document, you can do WordPress.
Right.
So if you want to have a WordPress website, though, you do need website hosting. And that's going to be, again, like $25 for the year, $30 for the year, whatever it is. $10 for a domain name. I'm trying to think of what other costs we might incur, but sign up for your web hosting. It'll tell you how to install WordPress. And they even have what they call plugins, which are almost like I guess they're analogous to apps. And they have podcasting plugins, which means, okay, it's like step one, click here and put the link for your podcast episode, which you're going to get from Podbean. Step two, put your image for this episode, and you click browse.
It's almost like expansion packs for The Sims. You ever played The Sims? Get the expansion packs.
Yeah, you're going real nerdy on us right now.
I used to play it back in the day. It was fun. So
anyway, you build your website with WordPress. There's a million tutorials on how to do it, so it's super easy. Just go on YouTube and check that out. It's actually fun.
I built like 3 websites already. I never bothered doing main name or hosted them. They're just fun to just make a website, and it's so easy. You can do it in an hour.
So you have your podcast file hosted at Podbean or wherever. You have your own website, and on your website you put a link to the Podbean episode. And that's basically it. You could share it to make a Twitter account, a YouTube, a Facebook page, which we've done a lot of stuff for the show.
The only thing we don't have is Instagram, just because it doesn't really make sense, for a podcast.
Yeah.
Unless we were like that big where, we want to have an Instagram of us traveling and doing shows, but, we're not doing that. So really don't see a point in having one.
So that's pretty much it. So once that basically takes you from why you should do it, to how to do it, to what you need to do it, and then you do it, and then it's done. And so the other 2 big things we'll mention, you got to be on iTunes. That's like the creme de la creme of podcasting, right? I hate Apple everything, but you have to have your podcast on iTunes. Yeah. Stitcher is probably the second most popular one. And basically, iTunes and Stitcher, you're not uploading your podcast there. All you're doing is giving them a link basically to your podcast, and your podcast, as you release episodes, it'll automatically update on iTunes. Right. And there's a form. You go out, you fill the form out. I would probably wait till you have like 3 episodes or something already done. You could do it after your first episode. You'll probably still get approved.
Isn't that what we did, right? After the first episode?
We did 1, but we had the website up and it looked professional, and our audio quality was good. And so it took maybe 2 days, and then we got approved by both iTunes and Stitcher. And so now that's just another way that people can find your show.
And that's what Grant always preaches: is obscurity is people's, your biggest problem. That's your biggest obstacle, and
No one knows you.
no one knows you. So if you can find different ways to get your name out there, especially if you're doing a podcast or starting a business or whatever it is, that's key. You gotta get out in front of people, because how people can know you're there. You can have a machine that makes turns pillows into gold, but if people don't know about it, it ain't worth shit.
Exactly. So I guess you want to just we'll recap kind of the process real quick and then just kind of wrap it up. Unless you have anything else to add.
Not really.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The first thing we talked about, should you make a podcast? Yes, you should, because everybody has something, worth sharing. Whether it's really obscure or a little bit more general, you kind of going to pick what it is you want to talk about and then just decide to do it and commit to it.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing, is commit to it. Don't start, halfway start your website and do all this shit and then not do it. It's just, don't be that guy or gal. But yeah, that's basically it,
And then, once you decide to do it, buy your microphones. We'll send you a link. Buy a dynamic mic. Download Audacity or GarageBand. They're both free. If you want to do a video podcast, you're going to have to use Skype and one of the two programs we mentioned earlier, Pamela or Evair, and you can record it that way. So you record it, then you go to Levelator and Auphonic, either one of them. You clean the audio, and then you put it on your podcast hosting site, which is either Podbean or Libsyn or Blueberry or SoundCloud, whichever one you want to use. And that's pretty much it. You should already have signed up for iTunes, so it'll automatically be there. And then just share it everywhere, social media, on your own website, wherever.
And I know we did this a few months ago, so I guess we're kind of been a little vague on getting started. So if you have any questions, we're not hard to find, then we'll help you out. It's you can find us on Facebook, Twitter. We have our own site. We were just talking about. We're not very difficult to find, so just shoot us an email or message on any of those, and we'll get back to you.
Absolutely. So anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Nope, that's about it. What can I expect from us next week? What are we doing it on?
I don't know. I have a couple ideas. Nothing too solid. Maybe our first guest next week, but we've said that 3 times already. So
yeah, we gotta get somebody on here. But I think if we do that, this show's gonna end up running over an hour. Which whatever. Hopefully Podbean won't charge us extra. But that's another thing with Podbean. If you get a certain amount of data, I guess you can store on there.
You get 100 megabytes a month, which basically means that you can comfortably do half-hour shows once a week.
Right.
If you're going to do longer than a half hour, which we do all the time, you have to lower.
How are we getting away with this?
You have to lower the. I got flies all over the place. You have to lower the bit rate, which basically is the quality of the audio. That makes a bigger difference if you're listening to music. When you're listening to two assholes talk, it really doesn't matter that much. So, for example, I think 128 is the default. We'll lower it to 96 or 80 or 64, and that changes how big the file size is. And so I'll have to keep lowering that, and that way it'll fit in the allotted amount of data we have. Yeah,
so if you could probably tell when our episodes are made in the beginning of the month or the end of it, because our data's it's going lower and lower. Sounds getting worse and worse.
Well, you know what? But that's the point, though, is that you really can't tell, so it doesn't make a difference. Some of the best podcasts record at like 96. I forget
it's just voice. I mean, it's not like you said. If you listen to music, you have all these different frequencies and
if you really want to hear the lows and the highs all together and everything, you obviously want really high quality audio, but that makes really big file sizes. So, oh, by the way, before we go, tell me about the tank, the sensory deprivation tank.
Oh, I just found another place in Ocean because actually I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm going to start researching this. Maybe I'll bring one to you guys one day in Tom's River. But I was pissed to find out that they just opened one in Ocean Township. I'm like, fuck,
I had seen that online because I remember looking it up saying I wanted to go. So tell me, what is it? What's the idea behind it, and how was it?
It basically, well, first of all, it was awesome. It basically is you're putting a tank, and it's like maybe like a 3.5 foot by 8 tank, so you fit in there comfortably. You can kind of move around, stretch a little bit.
It's almost like an oversized bathtub kind of thing, or
in a sense, yeah, but it's a dome shape. I saw the pictures of the one in Ocean. They're a
it's
little
like a big
more
lid on
modern,
it like this, right?
Yeah, it almost looks like a pod like a futuristic something you would drive in, and it kind of lifts up a hatch that you get into. The one I went to almost looked like an oversized like ice bucket, something you go get ice out of in a hotel or something. Or actually, better example, like a high school football team, that big bucket of ice thing.
Yeah.
Where you open the hatch door and get in. But so it's filled with like 10 inches of water, but the water has about like 1,000 pounds of salt in it. And what it does is it makes you float effortlessly.
So it's so buoyant.
Water's more dense, yeah.
Yeah, it's so buoyant. It's like even more buoyant than like the Dead Sea or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you're floating, on top.
So you don't feel like you're in the water. You just feel like you're almost on a mattress or something, but you don't feel anything holding you. Is that
yeah? You don't feel anything. And the cool thing is you don't feel anything, and the water temperature is the same temperature as our blood, our body temperature. So after a while, once you get settled, and it's almost instant. But like once you're laying there for a while and you start kind of meditating, if you're into that and stuff like that, like you start to forget you're in water, and you don't feel it, at all. It's almost like I was talking to Steve about it. It's almost like you're a baby in a womb. That's what I felt like. I was like, I'm like back to when I was not a year old,
So you don't feel anything on your body like pulling you because it kind of counteracts gravity because it's so buoyant. The water's the same. The water's the same temperature, and I'm guessing when they close that tank, it's soundproof, right?
Yeah. I put the earphones in. Earplugs just so I don't get water in my ears anyway, because the water level's like right, I guess right at your ears. Right. And you don't want to get that water. The water is very clean because they obviously clean it with chlorine, and they have a really high-end filtration system. Yeah, but the water does sit in there for like 2 months at a time because the salt, it's $1,000 worth of salt every time they put new water in there, so they can't be changing it every week or every day. So yeah, you don't want to get the water in your mouth or your, inside you at all. But
that's actually kind of gross.
It is, but it's not. It's not. Like I said, that they got. It's no grosser than the water that comes out your tap. All the shit they put in there to purify that. So,
I guess if you really have a problem with it, you could buy your own $15,000 tank. Otherwise, you just gotta
suck it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is it like?
But it's cool because But the idea of it is to knock out. It's why it's called sensory deprivation. It knocks out your senses. So you have your earplugs and you can't hear anything. You're floating. You can't feel anything.
It's pitch black, right?
It's pitch black, so you can't see anything. The only thing you can do is taste the water if you really felt like it, but we just talked about not to do that. So
and so you're kind of alone with your thoughts.
Basically. And that's funny you say that because I was listening, because before I did it, I watched a couple documentaries just, out of curiosity, 20-minute long documentaries, just seeing what they were. And someone said that, like, oh, well, why do you want to do that? So you sit with your thoughts the whole time? It's like, yeah, what are you afraid of your own thoughts? You got to keep busy all day because you're afraid of thinking, It's
kind of funny because some people would either say like me, that sounds really intriguing, I want to do it. Other people would say that's so fucking stupid. Right. But if you think about it, when's the last time you couldn't feel anything, you couldn't see anything, you couldn't hear anything, and all you had was your own thoughts with nothing else to bother you in the whole world? I don't think I've ever experienced that in my whole life. You know what I mean?
Right. And the key thing is all right, when I went there, like I said, I did all this research before I went there anyway. So the guy was giving me the spiel. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I know. But listen to the spiel, because actually one little nugget of information that, was, I guess it kind of set my mind in the right direction before going in there, which he said, basically you're all day long, you're thinking, your eyes are looking at stuff, you're hearing stuff, your senses are always going, they're always firing.
Right.
Like, going in the tank is almost, and they're usually 90-minute sessions, and for like 90 minutes, you just give your brain a break. You give it like a mini vacation, where you can just stop thinking. Except the only thing you think about is the thoughts that naturally flow into your head. But, you have no senses. It's pitch black. So, that kind of messes with you a little bit.
And then, real quick, just so before we wrap it up, what was it like when you were in the tank, and then what was it like right after you got out?
One thing I have to add is look up reviews. The place I went to was really good, but
Where was
I'm not
it?
gonna drop. It's in Philly. There's two of them in Philly. I went to obviously one of them, and I won't drop the name. You know what? It was a great experience because the guy actually said he was floating for a while. That's what they call it. They call you floating. Floating for a while. Yeah, and
You're a
and
floater.
what happened was he was floating all, going to different places.
See, I'd be worried about a floater in a tank. That's what I'd be worried about.
Yeah, well, I look in there before, obviously I got in, but he's a floater. He's been floating for a while, and he said he realized there was nothing in Philly or nothing nearby or just a one, so he decided to open his up. But I had a problem with his was it sucks when it's called the drip, like because there's moisture in there and it gets humid. So it really pissed me off towards the end. I finally got comfortable where I was really meditating, and a drip came down from the top and dripped into the water. And it just fucking threw me all off. It woke me up, and I was like, God, come on, dude. I was just getting comfortable, and then it got water dripping down. But it was great because when you leave, it's almost like it's euphoric. It's almost like you're being reborn for the day. Everything's kind of brighter. You feel just better. I mean, I definitely suggest it to anybody just to try it. Just give it a try.
Yeah, let's. We'll go, and then we'll talk about it again once we both go. We'll go to the One in Ocean and see what it's like.
What are you doing this weekend? You busy?
This weekend, yeah, is no good, but maybe next weekend.
That'd be better, actually. Yeah. Okay. We'll talk during the week next time, and maybe not by next episode, but the following. We'll give you guys an update because you'll enjoy it. It's cool, man. It's definitely really cool. And so definitely check it out. I just was telling you before the show. I ordered some kava. It's supposed to make you relax. Relax the body.
You gonna drink that before you go in the tank?
No, I probably smoke a little bud though, because I don't know.
I was gonna ask you if someone is so inclined to smoke marijuana on occasion, should they do it before the tank? I wasn't gonna say you personally, but I guess so.
I don't care. Yeah, you know why? Because I like the feeling of just losing your mind a little bit and kind of making yourself paranoid. Where I don't know, it kind of unleashes new thoughts where you can kind of have little breakthroughs in your own life of what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, what you have to do more of or less of. So many people are afraid of that though. They're afraid of their own thoughts, where they just get so caught up in this thing of life and they don't realize they have control of it. They don't have to play along if they don't want to.
Yeah.
But hey, that's why it is what it is. But
very cool. And by the way, I just thought of this, and I didn't run it by you yet, so this is the first time you're hearing it. But if somebody actually starts a podcast because they heard us do this episode and we kind of pushed them over the edge to actually do it, we're each going to buy you our favorite book, and then we're going to bring you on our podcast to help you promote your new podcast.
All right.
And that's only outstanding. That offer only stands for the next month or so. We'll do it for 1 month if we hear from someone. Because imagine we blow this podcast up in 2 years, and everyone's like, "By the way, I started a podcast, and we have 50 people.
Yeah,
who want to come on the show
and want books and shit."
Well, I'm happy to buy the books. It's more about.
I already know what book you're going to give them, so I have to think of something else.
Well, maybe we'll see. It'll be a surprise to you, but so hopefully someone out there will start a damn podcast. Just fucking do it.
Just do it, because you know what? In this world of useless and bullshit information, we got to get some good stuff out there. So make a damn podcast.
So sounds good, and we'll see you guys next week. And we may or may not have a guest, and we may or may not be reporting back on sensory deprivation, but we shall see.
All right. God bless America.
Later.
Yeah.